A little while ago, I was browsing the PlayStation Store looking for just something new to play. I didn't have to have the new big game or something that I could sink 100 hours into. Just something casual, quick shot of adrenaline, something just exciting, maybe even nostalgic. And something caught my eye that day I went on the store. It was a game that I had played on my Xbox 360 a decade ago. And it was when I was experiencing high school for the first time. It reminded me of being a teen, blocking out the world, putting the music on full blast. That game was Need for Speed Rivals.
Although the night is long, I know the day is coming. All of the things I own, they all know me, boys. I got somewhere to be. Every single morning, I might just lose my job. No excuses. Today I'm staying no regrets.
For a lot of people, Need for Speed has been the definitive arcade racing experience. It has touched also many car communities in their games, such as the JDM lovers, the sanctioned racing enjoyers, and the standard casual racers. There is a game somewhere in their 30 years that will likely tickle your fancy. I have covered this franchise already on this channel, going in depth as to where I think they shone the brightest, and how they have veered off course. I enjoyed the two underground games, Carbon and Pro Street, which I grew up with, but got a bit lost when Undercover and the two Shift games came out. Hot Pursuit seemed like an interesting decision for me as well, harkening back to the very first games of Cops Against Racers, albeit set now in an open world where both roam. In 2012, we also got that Most Wanted reboot, which I recently discovered to my surprise had divided the Need for Speed community. I had bought that game back in the day on Xbox 360, as I had not had the opportunity to play the original and wanted to give this one a shot, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. The city of Fairhaven felt like a dense, sprawling place, where games like Underground and Carbon had cities that felt more vibrant and alive in the night. Fairhaven felt like an urban, grimy, realistic portrayal of some industrial port. Throw in the mechanics of the Most Wanted Blacklist, discovering hidden cars all over the city to get away from the cops, and the Burnout Paradise treatment of hidden shortcuts, jumps, and details in the city from Criterion, and we had what I believed was a worthy successor of the previous generation's game. The key word here, however, was successor, or reboot to be more precise, because while short term it was a successful means to introduce the Most Wanted concept to a new generation of consoles and gamers, the IP had not given a clear idea that it knew what its definitive identity or direction was. Their last 7 games at this point were Need for Speed Undercover, Shift, World, the doomed MMO, Hot Pursuit, Shift 2, The Run, and now Most Wanted 2012. Not exactly many similarities between them, nor were all of them received well, such as the buggy Undercover, the underdeveloped The Run, or the poorly supported World. Shift and Shift 2 had its own community, but it was clear by that time that when Forza 4 and Gran Turismo 5 came around that market was theirs for the taking. So out of these experiments, the lone candidate seemed to be Hot Pursuit, which took a concept that Need for Speed had and built and improved upon it in accordance with what gamers were enjoying at the time. Free roam, open worlds, and online multiplayer. Back when they were still tinkering with that autolog system. With this in mind, it seemed that it was the play from EA when it came to the approach of the next Need for Speed game. They had already prepared their studio EA Gothenburg, later branded Ghost Games, for this project, enlisting Criterion to be support and employing some black box employees too, while the rest were restructured for online support. This would also be their first game to be released on the upcoming PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, and was an opportunity to not only show off their new shiny game in glorious detail, but also introduce it to their next generation of consoles and gamers. It seemed then that the publishers were fully aware of the stakes and put their best foot forward when it came to the development team, though the annual output of the games did already raise a few red flags and eyebrows in the past. At E3 2012, the Criterion Vice President had this to say: The days of random developers churning out yearly Need for Speed installments were over. Anyway, the only thing left now was to pick what type of game they were going to develop, based on all the experiments of the past few years. And it seemed like there was only one logical option.
You're asleep. I am awake. I'm the reality show. The catalyst. 15 minutes you'll never have.
We are the enemy of freedom.
I will run.
We are the shadow you can't
I will
shake.
never stop.
We will hunt you down.
You'll never catch me.
Not stop.
You will make me famous.
You will fail. You will break.
You are my challenge.
You are our target.
You are my rival.
Need for Speed Rivals released on 19 November 2013. Because of how I enjoyed The Most Wanted the year before, I was excited for this release, as it had seemed from the promotional material to be another radical approach from the franchise to the new game. After purchasing it and trying it out on my PlayStation 5 last month, I realized how much of my memories were rekindled once I set off in the county of Redwood. The free roam of this game pulls you in immediately as you drive through sun-soaked deserts, snowy mountain roads, freeways, along coastlines, and through woods. It's a step away from the sprawling Fairhaven and cities we had seen in the previous installments and towards the open world of Hot Pursuit. Dynamic weather also means you get rain that drips down your windshield or leaves that blow into your camera, both that add to a fantastic environment. Add with that the typical jumps and shortcuts from Criterion and you have something that's even more Burnout Paradise-like than the Most Wanted reboot, especially capturing the game's feeling of raw speed, which I feel very few Need for Speeds have pulled off before or since. The cops in this game also give a proper challenge. While just your typical muscle or sports cars at first, they soon send in the exotics that can keep up with even your fastest vehicle, along with the usual choppers, spike strips, and roadblocks. It becomes a mad dash for the next safe house, as you need to bank your speed points quickly in a safe house before getting busted and losing it all. It's a simple and effective game of risk and reward, which I prefer over the more complicated approach of Heat and Unbound with the day-night racing and earning. There is also the old drive system, which this game lives and dies by. This new version of the autolog system of the previous games allowed seamless connections to your friends and constantly showed their speed wall times, how fast they went between speed cameras, how fast they completed races, and allowed you to join each other's sessions. It allowed you to compete to be the best of the best like never before. Now that's the gameplay all well said and done. Now, what about the customization? You can change the design of your license plate? Rivals is of course not the first time where customization has been stripped away completely. Like its immediate predecessors, this game has also decided that instead of a tuning, modifying streetcar experience, it wants to focus more on the pursuits and exotics. This is a debated thing in the NFS community, with many fans feeling it's what made their best games great, such as the two Underground games. Here's the thing though, I did not really mind this decision. I was not big on customization at all, and instead welcomed the expanded showroom of cars in the game in their original, unmodified glory. This is also one of the only Need for Speed games that I recall that had an extensive collection of Ferraris in them, my favorite car since a young age, and certainly not a car that should be modifying or tuning. Full sending an F40 down a straight or a 458 Italia along a winding road was enough to make me happy. So instead of cosmetics, the customization comes down to improving your car's performance in a typical arcade fashion from the 90s, making general improvements to your top speed, acceleration, durability, strength, and control in 5 tiers each. Cars also came with a default heat level that determined at any point what the cops' reaction to you may be when driving through the roads of Redwood. And the last perk to the customization was the Pursuit Tech, an even more arcade-like addition of gadgets that can help you gain the upper hand in races and pursuits, such as shockwaves that push cars back, EMPs that will slow down anyone, jammers to jam boosts and map navigation, and more. Similar to kind of the perks of the precursory buddy system or crew that you had in Carbon. It made racing feel like it could still go down to the wire and that your focus had to be sharp 100% of the time. The gameplay loop also centers around completing speed wall objectives, which as the racer comes in 3 flavors: racing, cop chasing, and stunts. Each chapter, it gets incrementally difficult and challenges you to go faster, higher, and further. As the cop, it's all about busting and putting racers behind bars. Your approaches involve interfering with racers, responding fast enough to get to a checkpoint, or taking down a single racer in a set time. So, it seems the gameplay and customization are figured out and fun. It felt like they had cracked the code in keeping it simple, but enhancing the game in meaningful ways that a casual racer could just sink in. But that was not the best part when I started playing this game. This Need for Speed did something that the others had not done that I had never seen before in this franchise. It had a story. While it really is treated as more of a secondary thing in most racing games, I had always felt a decent or coherent plot could work harmoniously with any gameplay of a Need for Speed, Forza, or Gran Turismo. It does not have to be as fleshed out or poignant as other genres, but just entertaining and engaging. Take for example the overarching story of Most Wanted 2005 and Carbon. Cheesy? Yes. Predictable? Sure. Entertaining? Absolutely. Even the more minor stories of the speed festivals in games like Pro Street or Forza Horizon 1 was fun enough to add a little more stake to each race. But Rivals was something that at that point I had never seen before. It was trying to be original and creative in its presentation through news reports, live streams and feeds, just being told from a point of view as it were a log or memoir from both the perspective of Zephyr, the racer, and F8 or Fate, the cop. For Zephyr, it's a pursuit of fame and glory through dangerous racing in the county. The rise of his notoriety and reputation fuels him to go faster and take more risks. He even sees cops as not the law, but instead as rivals that he needs to beat. For Fate, it's an opportunity to stop the racing outbreak in his county by going for the head of the snake, Zephyr himself. Going undercover, taking out races completely and breaking protocols himself is steps he does not hesitate to take, as his obsession with stopping them once and for all drives him forward. It's also something that the game never quite shies away from. It never once condones the actions of either the enforcer or the entertainer, and shows wanton destruction and chaos caused by both the law and the lawless. It seemingly had everything ready for a great game. A good gameplay loop, a strong focus on the pursuit and cops, and a gripping story that was unfamiliar but welcome. It was time to rev this engine up. And then we just stayed in cruise control. Don't get me wrong, the narrative progressed well, with a rise in action culminating into a grand finale in both the racer and cop storyline, with open endings for Zephyr and Fate. But the gameplay got left in the dust. Outside of a middle chapter where you go undercover as your rival's law enforcement or racing legion and the final mission, the gameplay feels very disconnected to the story. It boils basically down to complete these missions in a bronze time or third place, then a few chapters later you complete more missions in a silver time or second place, and so on, until the final. When I compare that to games that had more narrative driven missions such as Most Wanted 2005, Carbon, or even the modern Payback, it feels like they could make something more correlated to the story. The other glaring issue was the all drive. I said this game lived and died by it. And though it did great things for the connectivity for both generations of consoles it released on and allowing Need for Speed to dip its toes into multiplayer, it came at a cost. This game was an always online experience, which seemed a baffling choice. I did not have great internet back in 2013 either, which meant if there was even rain in the air, there was no Rivals for me. Forza Horizon 1, which also introduced the multiplayer options in an open world, released 2 years prior and had both offline and online capabilities, cementing this decision as damning even more. When we look at these two decisions together, it really seemed like Rivals wanted to be what Need for Speed World was not, despite never being marketed as an MMO or even an online-only experience. In the end, I think the pursuit of this also harmed the story that I mentioned earlier. While it is fantastic to watch, it's less fantastic to play, as it never permeates enough through the rest of the game to make a noticeable impact on what you do. As Ghost Game's first venture, aided by the wisdoms of Criterion and Black Box, this was not a bad attempt by any means. It felt like an original venture, unlike its predecessors. It took an excellent concept in Hot Pursuit and aimed to capture that and told an intriguing story along with it. All the pieces might not have fit, and some decisions held it back, but I felt like this would have been a beginning to a great continuous storyline between Zephyr and Fate, as their rivalry could grow over multiple games and expand both gameplay and the world, such as imagine Zephyr and Fate's storyline maybe as the grand finale being something similar to what The Run tried to do as in Journey Across America. Rivals was also duly awarded with good sales and Racing Game of the Year accolades. With that in mind, and with the Ghost Games team now having some experience under their belt, it would make sense to now develop another game in a similar vein, which would also give the fanbase an expectation of the next game and build a healthy community. Except, their new game would be Need for Speed 2015, another soft reboot of the entire series. And while it did bring some fan favorite things like full customization features for vehicles, JDM cars, and a sharp focus on street racing, it was yet another departure from what any of the previous games had built on. This, coupled with uninspired gameplay and a subpar story, meant it was largely forgettable for me. And Rivals, in the end, seemed just another afterthought. It's this point which I consider the great what if for modern Need for Speed. What if Rivals had not made All Drive a be-all, end-all design? What if the gameplay had a narrative connection? What if they carried Zephyr and Fate over multiple games in an arching, culminating saga? I feel like it would have been more gripping and attractive than the catalogue of games we did get after, with the fanbase slowly but surely turning away to seek other arcade or simulation racing options. Their latest installment, Unbound, seems even less interested in its online features than Rivals a decade prior, despite promises being made for continuous content to be delivered. 2013 was really the last year that I truly enjoyed a Need for Speed game. And while I don't have much hope, unfortunately, for what's to come, I can now always go back to Redwood, back to my rival.
They say speed kills, but if you aren't speeding, then you aren't living.